Sometimes it might feel that Zerg is the one race that is meant to be exclusively played defensively, where you're just simply sitting back for 10-15 minutes, macroing up a massive economy, and eventually you use that economy to overpower your opponent. However, at the professional level of play in StarCraft 2, in particular in best of 5s and best of 7 series, it is very common for a Zerg player to occasionally cheese their opponent as well, just to keep the opponent on their toes. Now, this particular game that was recently played last weekend actually at WCS Leipzig, the first premier tournament I believe of 2018 so far. In this particular match of Serral versus SpeCial, Serral, and I'm gonna go ahead and spoil it right now, decides to Nydus Rush his opponent. Now at this point in time, as of me making this video, Serral is the rank 1 player on the planet, statistically speaking. Now, of course, he hasn't really competed against a lot of the Korean guys recently, and of course, it's just simply a statistic, but there is no denying that right at this point in time, Serral is very good at the game. And I can imagine that some of you might be interested in how a top-level Zerg player decides to go for a Nydus Rush. How do you go ahead and execute that if you are one of the very best players in all of StarCraft 2? And I know that I'm curious as well, because this is a strategy that is very fun to play and it's very strong. Now, a couple of things before we jump into the strategy itself that I do want to point out. Serral does not go for any kind of scouting in this game. As a matter of fact, I think he only pokes in with this overlord that's currently flying across the map to see what kind of war is going on here at the front. But other than that, he never confirms whether or not there's a third base. He never flies in an overlord into the main. He's essentially playing this blindly. Okay, that's one thing to keep in mind. Now, it may happen when you're trying this build yourself that a Terran player just accidentally counters this strategy. The reason why he decides to go for this build, however, is because it's very common for a Terran player to go for a third command center early, and on Backwater LE, one of the new maps, the third base is essentially free to take. There's really no attack path into this third base location, so usually a Terran player just simply has to, I guess, worry about the high grounds and the low grounds, whatnot over here, but also at the front door right here, outside of the natural. There's not really a whole lot of risk for a Terran player to go ahead and take a third base on, and since SpeCial is definitely a macro-focused Terran himself, if you assume that he's already going to be going for a quick third command center on like a regular map, he's definitely going to be going for it on this map as well. So just know that there are a couple of mind games at play right here, and that if you're trying this build out yourself, you may accidentally end up getting countered even when the Terran player didn't necessarily mean to. There's no scouting here whatsoever, which means that Serral is just simply playing his own A game. So, he opens up with a standard hatch gas pool. So at 17 supply, he goes for the hatchery on the low ground. Very shortly, he will be following it up with an extractor here in the main base. And then he will also be getting himself the metabolic boost upgrade. As a matter of fact, I would say like the first 4 or so minutes of this game look very, very standard. There's really no deviation that he makes from his regular build. He's just playing his standard early game build. He's gonna go for a lot of queens, he's gonna go for a third hatchery very early on, he's gonna go for the metabolic boost upgrade, he's really not cutting any corners whatsoever. As a matter of fact, like I said, the first minutes look very standard. There's really no tell in, or at what point rather, he decides to go for this cheese and where he decides to just simply stop playing the macro game. It's pretty cool, because that means that if the Terran player, right, is opening up with something hyper aggressive, say the Terran player is going to be going for like double factory play, and he sees that there's a lot of Hellions moving across the map, he can just simply decide to not go for this build whatsoever, and just play his normal game instead, right? He can just simply play the defensive style as well if he needs to. So, I'll show you the point exactly where he decides to go for this strategy instead, so you can roughly decide when you can go ahead and deviate from the quote-unquote standard plan as well. So early game, he goes for the hatch gas pool, 17, 17, 17 if I'm not mistaken. Right at 100 gas or a little bit after, he starts up the metabolic boost upgrade, and now he's also gonna pull 2 drones out of gas. Now this is an important moment, okay? As a matter of fact, for the next couple of minutes, nothing really is going to be changing out of Serral's standard build. Everything is decided by this one lowly drone that is now left over to mine that single extractor. As Serral will decide to go for his first premier tech structure right when this drone reaches 100 gas. So essentially, this entire build is determined by a single drone in a gas geyser, and up to the point where this drone has mined 100 gas in total, so you can see right here at the bottom of the screen how many resources he's got available right now. That's the point at which he will decide to go for this push instead. So early game, there's going to be a little bit of juggling back and forth with the Reaper. Beautiful micro here, by the way, by SpeCial. You'll be able to see how much value he gets out of just a single Reaper, really not losing anything, and really being just an absolute pain in the butt. Great micro as well with Serral initially. He keeps 2 of those Zerglings alive here for the time being. And he also decides to just simply go ahead and put down a tumor here with the first queen. Now, I think this is a map-specific thing. It might also be due to the fact that Serral goes for a very quick third base. It's kind of hard to call exactly why he decides to go for the tumor first here, rather than the inject like he did in the main base. I don't think it really matters all too much to discuss that, because that's a very minor little detail. But I guess it is, you know, a big enough deal to go ahead and point out right now. So far, Serral's just playing his very standard build. He went for a very quick third hatchery as well. Nothing all too surprising right there. He's essentially spending all of his larvae on drones, and whenever he's got leftover minerals, he's adding on additional queens. That's kind of how this goes. So right now at the front base, he has indeed confirmed that there is a bit of a wall here. Nothing all too crazy going on. Just a standard 1-1-1 kind of style. Starport apparently goes up in the main base. Nothing all too crazy right there. And this single drone here is still just simply mining the good old gas. Now Serral, he does one of those pro gamer things. This happens quite a bit. Instead of just simply pulling drones off of the mineral line at the exact moment, Serral instead produces 2 drones and rallies them directly into the extractor. So you'll be able to see that here in just a second, where the drones finish up and he's going to start up more and more gas production that way. This is something you don't really have to do. Just simply, you know, put the drones back into the gas once you reach 100 gas, or when metabolic boost upgrade finishes. So notice this lines up perfectly. Metabolic boost is just completed a second ago, and Serral is just about to reach 100 gas, and that's also just about the time that the 3 drones are back in gas. So far, at this point in the game, nothing weird has happened, right? Let's have a look at what he does next. So, he decides to go for a rather quick lair. Now, he's also producing a handful of Zerglings. Very standard here. You produce, like, you know, anywhere between, like, 6 to, like, 15 or so, or 16-ish Zerglings, right when a spawning pool upgrade finishes, just so you have your metabolic boost ready to go, in case Hellions or whatnot decide to be a little bit of a nuisance. But here we go. So here's the first little bit of a transition. Serral decides to spend his next 100 gas on the lair. This is not all too surprising just yet, but he also decides to get himself another gas right here on the low ground expansion. And very shortly, you'll be able to see him follow this up with a Roach Warren as well. There we go, the Roach Warren is going down. Now this may be a seemingly random timing for Serral. It's really not. If you start up the lair, and about a third of the way of the lair finishing, you start up the Roach Warren, they will finish up at the exact same timing. So that's the reason right here. It seems a little bit random. It's really not, though. All this time, though, he's just simply producing a handful of links here and there whenever he needs to, and he's really just focusing on more and more drones. Here, the second gas geyser goes down as well. I would highly recommend, I will give you like an easier version of this build in just a little bit, okay, near the ending of this video. But I would highly recommend you just take them at the same time. Don't make it like more difficult than it needs to be. Serral is a top level player. He knows exactly what it is he's doing. But, you know, there's no denying that it can become a little bit overcomplicated if you're making it that way. Alright, so he saturates a couple of drones here at the third base location as well. And he goes for the Roach Warren pretty early on. And now that the Roach Warren is finished, and the lair is done as well, he's gonna start up the Nydus network. So notice what he's done so far, right? Hatch gas pool. At 100 gas, he decides to pull 2 drones out of the gas, starts up metabolic boost upgrade, and goes for additional queens. Then, when the single drone in the main base mined 100 gas, he started up the lair. When he started up the lair, he started up 2 more gas geysers as well, then a Roach Warren, and eventually, once that lair finishes, he's gonna have precisely 200 gas to start up the Nydus network. Now, from here on out, he's gonna primarily focus on making units. So notice Roach Warren is done. Nydus network is coming in. He's got roughly 42 harvesters right at this point in time. Some of them may end up getting killed, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, as he was forced to make some Zerglings in between as well, just because his opponent decided to go for a little bit of, you know, harassment here and there. And as a matter of fact, in this particular instance, we see that quick fleet beacon, or rather, not the fleet beacon, that's a proto structure loco, but we see the quick fusion core with the ranged upgrade for the Liberator. So something a little bit aggressive here from the Terran player. But from here on out, Serral just simply decides to start making non-stop units instead. So he's adding on more queens. He's very scarcely injecting his bases. right? He doesn't really want to inject all too much either, because you don't really need too much if you're playing a roach-based army. Instead, he's using the first 2 queens that he made to save up energy so he can have those transfuses available by the time this push hits. So notice right here, he's just simply trying to go for the Nydus network. Now, in this case, the Terran player actually decided to go for that single Viking. I don't actually know where it's at. Yeah, the Viking was a bit of a pain in the butt, so Serral was forced to delay this push for a while, as all of the overlords got cleaned up around the map. But normally, you would want to fly it in right as soon as you possibly can, put the Nydus Worm down into the main base, load up the queens first, and this is a big deal, because everything you put in first is also going to pop out first. Right? So he's going to put the energy, I'm assuming here at the very least, he puts in the high energy queens first, as the Nydus Worm will go up into the main base very shortly. Still just making more and more units, so this build is a little bit delayed just because the Terran player is being a bit of a nuisance by denying this, but here we go, right? Overseer arrives on the other side of the map, and this is going to be a little bit later than ideally you want it to. He puts up the Nydus Worm inside of the main base, and in this, or at this point, he's also going to be capable of putting in those queens. So it's really important you put in the queens first. So there we go, all of the queens go in, and then the roaches, right? He's just rallying all of his hatcheries right now towards that Nydus Worm as well, which means that all of the units that spawn at this point will just automatically walk into the Nydus Worm, and therefore they're going to be capable of getting out on the other side of the map as well. Now, the reason why you want to put in the queens first is, like I said, so they come out first as well. It's real important to do that because the transfuses of those queens are going to be critical in order to keep the Nydus Worm alive, right? So you get them out, you want to transfuse this Nydus Worm if you need to. Now, this instance, the Terran player is not heavily target firing down the Nydus Worm. But if you needed to, you could go ahead and just simply click on the queens, transfuse the Nydus Worm whenever you need to, and that should allow you to just simply get a ton of units out very easily without the Nydus Worm immediately falling. Whereas if you put the roaches in first, it's gonna get very messy, as they can just simply target fire down the Nydus Worm, and that's kind of the end of the push right there, right? All of that work done for absolutely nothing. So, I mean, SpeCial already lost 41 workers right then and there. It went down very quickly. They go down very rapidly. And notice, right, there's been no scouting other than, like, seeing the front here from Serral. And SpeCial, at this point, is just simply gonna GG out. So the first 4 minutes of this game are very normal. However, Serral decides to go for this push that is very aggressive and just simply absolutely shreks his opponent. So let's look at it once more and discuss the exact build order, how I would go ahead and execute it myself if I want to go ahead and push something similar to my Terran opponent in a game of StarCraft 2 as well. So first off, I would recommend doing it in particular on maps where a Terran player has an easy time taking a third base, like for example, Backwater LE. Let's watch it on ×4 speed. So he decides to open up with a very standard hatch gas pool. Overlord at 13 supply right here. Then he adds on a couple more drones, and at 17 supply, he sends down a drone to the low ground to start up that hatchery. Very shortly after, he goes for the single extractor into the main base, and then also that spawning pool. Very normal so far. Puts 3 drones into the gas geyser. They're gonna start rapidly mining 100 gas. However, when he reaches 100 gas, he pulls 2 drones out of the gas geyser, and there's actually a slight delay during which he doesn't actually pull out the drones just yet. That is intentional, in case you're looking at this and like, well, that's a little sloppy, Serral. I mean, you're already building up to like 20 gas again before you pull the drones out of it. It's a minor detail. I wouldn't really focus on it too much unless like you're a top of the line grandmaster, at which point you probably don't need this video anyway. But there's no denying that he leaves them in there a little bit longer, pulls 2 drones out of gas, starts up queens as well as the metabolic boost. And very shortly afterwards, he goes for a very quick 3rd hatchery as well. In the early game, he's just simply making overlords, spending as much larva as he can on drones as well, and whenever he's got leftover minerals, he adds on additional queens. Next up, once he reaches 100 gas here on that single drone that was mining out of the extractor, he starts up the lair, puts 2 drones back into the gas geyser, and at that point you want to also start up 2 gases here in the low ground and also a roach warren. So I like to group things together. So once you start up the lair, put drones back into the gas, starts up 2 additional gas, just start up 2 additional gas geyser and then a roach warren. So group it all up together in, you know, in your head. That makes it significantly easier to remember. So hatch gas pool, At 100 gas, you start up 2 queens, you start up your spawning pool upgrade, metabolic boost, you pull 2 drones out of the gas. Then next up, after that single drone mined 100 gas, you put drones back into the gas, start up the lair, start up 2 additional gases, and you start up the roach warren. So group things together in your mind, it makes it so much easier. No evolution chamber, none of that shenanigans. And he also, and this is also worth noting, when he finishes up Zerging speed, he builds a group of links. So he goes for like 14 or so links in this particular instance, which is just to be safe. Now notice also at this point in the game, he starts saving up the energy here on those first 2 queens. He does not, you know, spread any more tumors. Instead, there's only 2 tumors actually going out on this map. That's a pretty important thing to note as well. So you save up a bunch of transfuses as well. Once the lair finishes, you immediately start up the Nydus network. You don't add on an additional gas or whatever, you just go for more queens as well as more roaches. And, you know, whenever you can, and you want to push as soon as you possibly can, whenever you can, put up the Nydus Worm inside of your opponent's main base. If your opponent is being a nuisance and denies your overlords, make sure you get an overseer routed across the map and put down the worm inside of the main base. Now, whenever you're pushing, put in the queens first. Rally all of your hatchery on top of the Nydus network and just simply unload on the other side of the map. Try to control-click the queens so you can transfuse them as well as the Nydus worm itself. And if you need to and you're a little worried, put up a second worm as well so you can hopefully go ahead and, you know, get all of your units out of the Nydus network and into your opponent's main base. So once again, there is a chance your opponent will just simply blind counter this, right? If, in this case, for example, SpeCial would have not gone for the quick 3rd command center and instead just simply made a lot more units, which, you know, can happen in a lot of the cases of Terran versus Zerg as well, this would probably have been blind countered. However, it's still likely to do a lot of damage. If Serral would have realized, hey, this push is over, I'm not going to be able to, you know, continue pushing here, he would have 100% of the time just simply gone back to droning and gotten back to his normal build. I'm going to make the assumption that, say, if, for example, SpeCial managed to target fire down the Nydus Worm right when it went up into the main base, I will make the assumption here that Serral probably would have just looked at it and be like, okay, look, I'm going to start up a 4th hatchery. I'm going to start up double evolution chamber, I'm going to start spreading a lot more creep, and I'm going to be focusing on my standard mid-game style. He would not try to continue pushing there, because if SpeCial is going to hold it the first time around, a second attack wave with the exact same strategy is very unlikely to do any kind of damage whatsoever. But this, however, is a way you can go ahead and execute a Nydus Worm rush in a Zerg vs Terran matchup, and how a top-level player like Serral would go about doing exactly that. I hope you enjoyed watching this video. If you like this kind of style, let me know by hitting that like button down below and commenting down below what other kinds of strategies you would like to see. I am more than interested in making more of these, but I'm never quite sure how many people are interested in a heavy, strategic, nerdy, focused video. But for now, I want to thank you for watching. Have an amazing day. Do not forget to smile, alright. A special shout out to the Patreon supporters. You guys are awesome. Thank you so much for supporting me. But I will see you all in the next one.